We all know and see Facebook, now rebranded as Meta, as this massive, strong and enormous corporation that it is now. But very few of us realize that when Facebook was initially born back in February of 2004, it was neither the first social media nor the best social media website out there. In reality, there was already a social networking site called MySpace with about 1 million subscribers when Facebook was introduced. And MySpace was already among the most well-known websites online for people like you and me to connect. Nonetheless, Facebook made history during the subsequent 4 years by conquering its competitor MySpace and going on to become one of the most powerful corporations. And for this reason, we have some very important and crucial business lessons to reflect on and learn from each of them, because more often than not, we all have a phenomenal idea. But then, after doing a little research, we tend to realize that there is already a giant company doing the exact same thing as we plan to do. I'm sure you have had a eureka moment. Then you looked it up online and found a well-known company doing something very similar to the idea which you have thought. That could be demoralizing and discouraging. However, what if I told you that you should be elated to launch a company even if there is already a great deal of rivalry and competition in the market? In fact, this is the best sign and a phenomenal opportunity to start a business. The problem statement is, how is it even possible to develop a company that can compete with $1 million company or a bigger company? And the solution to this question may be found in this story, which dates back on August 1st, 2003, where MySpace, the social media website, first appeared on the internet. Back then, the internet was still in its infancy and its use was still novel enough that people were still getting used to it. MySpace social networking features, which included the ability to connect with and meet new people online, were very similar to those of Facebook. Within a year, MySpace had become a worldwide phenomenon, with over 1 million members signing up in the very first month alone. By the end of the year, there were 5 million active MySpace accounts. This is when it was bought for $580 million by News Corp, a massive media conglomerate. Because back in 2005, News Corp was one of the few organizations that recognized the potential of social media advertisements and the bright future which they had. The day MySpace acquisition took place marked the dawn of the internet's era of capitalism. At that time, Facebook was only a college student website available to Ivy League students in the United States. On the contrary, between 2005 and 2008, more people visited MySpace than any other social networking site. Even more impressively, in 2006, it became the most visited website in the world, surpassing even Google. Over the subsequent 4 years, however, MySpace lost nearly half of its users to 115 million, while Facebook, the college community network, gained more than 1 billion users. Now, the interesting question arises, how come Facebook, which was the second mover in the social media space, was able to beat a company owned by such a huge company without any financial backing, and how come there was such a huge disparity in the success? Well, if you deep dive into human psychology, then you might be able to find the answer to this question. In human psychology and social network theory, there is a concept which is called triadic closure. This concept was first suggested by the German sociologist George Simmel in his book Sociology, which dates back more than a century old in 1908. So what exactly is this concept of triadic closure? Well, to explain this concept to you, I will use an example. Let's say there are 3 people, you, me, and another friend of mine. Let's name him James. So if we both know each other personally and I know my other friend James, then there is a very high probability that there will be a connection between you and James. Simply put, if A knows B and B knows C, then A is more likely to connect with C, which can increase the rate at which A gains C's trust because of the mutual connection. And I'm sure you have experienced it firsthand while using Facebook, LinkedIn or Instagram. When you get a request from someone with 100 mutual friends, there is a very high probability that you will accept it. However, triadic closure is just one of the many mechanisms by which new connections are formed in a complex network, and it can be used to understand and predict network growth. In comparison to Facebook, the most significant disadvantage of MySpace was that it did not permit users to use their real names as usernames. Consequently, despite the fact they could meet new people on the internet through shared interests, it was impossible to determine whom you were conversing with. And so, this became an odd connotation of privacy concern and creepiness. In contrast, Facebook recommended and insisted users use their real names as username. Why? Well, Mark Zuckerberg's vision was to use technology to help ordinary people like you and me form true connections. Whether it is true or not, the fact remains that Facebook's secret sauce was its emphasis on using original names, which encouraged users to branch out and make second and third connections, as well as interact with people outside their immediate social groups, network, and connections. This is where the common friend function came in handy, and as a result, Facebook networks became significantly more deeply embedded, allowing users to broaden their relationship outside their social circle. The name feature definitely played an imperative part in the popularity of Facebook, and that's why so many people who already had a MySpace account created a Facebook profile the moment the service became available to the general public in 2006. In light of this, one might wonder, why didn't MySpace copy Facebook's strategy and become dominant if the latter realized that the key differentiator between the two was the use of real names as usernames? Doesn't this sound like what Facebook did with Snapchat? With the introduction of Instagram stories, bluntly copying this feature from Snapchat. And actually, the MySpace team received support from a major corporation such as News Corp. So why weren't they able to incorporate and include this simple feature? As it turns out, MySpace being so huge is precisely why they were unable to implement the feature on their website. As a result of News Corp's transformation of MySpace into a legitimate business entity, MySpace was required to comply with applicable standards and procedures. The emphasis shifted from ideas and implementation to quarterly profits, annual profits, and all other corporate processes. Indeed, despite the fact that the MySpace folks came up with a great idea and also they were the first mover in this social space, it was first inspected by attorneys, then by so-called experts, and then a series of meetings were conducted, followed by a number of emails, and it just kept going back and forth. And in doing so, everything slowed down to a crawl wherein ideas vanished into the crowd of bureaucracy and wherein even the simplest of changes like adding a new feature took ages to implement. Facebook, on the other hand, was run by a group of college students who were able to quickly add, edit, tweak, and delete features and make big changes to the website without any excessive bureaucracy or adherence to rules and formalities. Unfortunately, it was already 2008 when MySpace added the option for genuine username, and Facebook had already surpassed it. To be more specific, MySpace eventually became a hierarchical organization with stringent guidelines and lacked overall agility and scalability. While on one hand, MySpace argued about who was right and who was wrong, Facebook focused on what was right and implemented changes on the fly. This was the second factor that contributed to MySpace's demise and Facebook's growth. And the story does not end there. Another major setback for MySpace was the results of its rigid business model, which provided the perfect condition for Facebook's meteoric rise to dominance. In fact, the recipe was so successful that even influenced the likes of Amazon, Google, and Apple. Facebook's secret sauce recipe was the idea of third-party integration to make the transition from a product to a platform. On May 24, 2007, Facebook announced that Facebook platform to be provided a blueprint for programmers to create applications that could communicate with core Facebook functions. For instance, the Facebook API could be used by Spotify so that users could share songs without ever leaving the app. On a lot of websites and games, you get a prompt of instant login through Facebook, which I'm sure is a feature that you might have used too. An example would be games like Candy Crush or online casino. Other services like Fitbit and Nike Run Club utilize the Facebook API to enable their customers to upload their run accomplishments directly to Facebook's newsfeed and share them with their friends. Thus, Facebook encouraged and became more open by enabling programmers and developers to utilize their platform to develop original products and services. In contrast, MySpace was built to be an extremely closed system, to the point where it actively blocked content from potential rivals. PhotoBucket, which was widely considered the best website for sharing online photographs at that time, was also banned by MySpace. This is the reason number 3 why Facebook is such a great platform for creators as well as users and marketers. So, to sum it up, the 3 factors for Facebook dominating the first mover of MySpace in the social space were: number 1, allowing real names of users. Well, it's basic human psychology. Everyone loves their names. So that move was very crucial. Number 2 was agility and scalability. and number 3 was transition from a product to a platform. In fact, Apple's extraordinary success can be traced back to this idea of evolving from a product to a platform. Even though Steve Jobs was initially hesitant about welcoming outside developers. However, when Apple started letting developers use its platform, the legendary App Store was born and Apple was changed for good. Android implemented the Play Store similarly. Well, these are stories where companies evolved when technology evolved. But there are a lot of other cases where companies ignored the changing dynamics and paradigm shifts. For example, Nokia. Very similar to MySpace, Nokia acted in a manner that made it difficult for developers to do their work because Symbian operating system was too restrictive for third-party apps to be created on. Another example would be Kodak, once a very prestigious name in the camera and photography industry, which was unable to keep up with the hyper-evolution of technology. Kodak adopted the razor blade model, one of the most famous business model which was invented by Gillette. It's the next case study I'll be doing, so consider subscribing as you wouldn't want to miss that famous razor blade business model, which helped Gillette to be relevant for more than a century. However, Kodak failed to see that the razor blade strategy that had brought its success in the past was now working against it. Kodak failed to reinvent and innovate and instead invested in the acquisition of numerous small businesses, thereby depleting funds that could have been used to promote the sale of digital cameras. Well, fast forward to 2006, Amazon also implemented its own method of third-party integration, making way for other businesses to sell their products through the platform. And with that one move, in 2020, Amazon earned $80.46 billion from its third-party seller services, which was higher than the company's revenue from its own suppliers by more than $2 billion. This is the absurd revenue stream that MySpace gave to Facebook, helping it to reach the billion-dollar valuation it now enjoys. Well, all of this brings us to the most crucial and important part of this episode, which is what can you learn from this business case study and how can you implement it in your own business? The first and foremost lesson is that every business owner and leader needs to know that the point of any kind of organizational structure is to help you make strategic judgments before it's too late. You need to get rid of these protocols as soon as you realize that they are hindering the implementation of ideas, or else they will ultimately doom your company. The speed of implementation is imperative, and procedures and protocols should be there to ensure agility and scalability rather than the other way around. The second lesson which we get from this case study is technology is great, but when we are making a product for the general public, human-centered design and human psychology should be the center of your strategy. To sum up, the simple fact that users could connect through mutual friends was the driving force behind Facebook's rise to popularity on par with that of MySpace. It followed the Tidic closure property, perhaps unconsciously, but it did follow it nonetheless, which became a very huge hit for them. Lastly and most importantly, it is perfectly acceptable to not be the industry's pioneer or a first mover. It's great because any company, no matter how large, will make mistakes when first entering a new market. And therein lies the window of opportunity for you to penetrate and surpass the existing companies. You can potentially save a lot of time, money, and energy by carefully analyzing these failures and applying the lessons you have learned in your own business. You will be able to race ahead of the competition by simply learning from their mistakes. And as legend says, success is most often achieved by those who don't know that failure is inevitable. Also, I want to quote Richard Branson, who says failure is only the end when you decide to stop. And I know, my friend, that you are not going to stop. Sometimes the end of one chapter is the beginning of a new one. So keep going. Go above and beyond. Well, that's all for this episode, but if you have learned anything new, then don't forget to subscribe to Alphause for all the latest brand secrets and business news, case studies, insights, and resources. Also, like the button to make the YouTube algorithm god happy, and do subscribe. And please leave a comment below I subscribed, and I will personally respond to all those comments. You can find this next video very interesting, as well as a playlist containing all the business case studies. This is Anuj from Alphause. See you in the next episode. Peace out.